The Broad Perspective Network is not responsible for the content of the following program. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to The Broad Perspective on the Broad Perspective Network. We're glad you're with us today. I'm Vivian Komori.
And I'm Greg Barnes.
And I'm Laura Feliz.
And it's at the time of this recording, it is a chilly day at the location where we record, and we're supposed to have some major temperature fluctuations for the next few days. It's got below freezing this morning, and it's going to be up to the 70s, 80s, and into the 90s by this weekend, is what we hear. So we've got a lot of things going on right now, but at this point, if you start hearing some teeth chattering, it's because it's very cold where we are. We wanted to kick it off and talk about net neutrality. It's an item that's in the news a lot. I think there's a lot of confusion about it. I know there was with me. Not necessarily about what the net neutrality does, but just the term. The term is kind of like so many things that are confusing. Do we want net neutrality or do we not want net neutrality? So we're going to try and simplify that just a little bit because it is an item that's very important right now. Things have changed because President Barack Obama, and I do believe it was a law, signed net neutrality into law. Am I correct? It was a law. And now President Trump has overturned that. And I think that people have a few days, like I'm going to say 75 to 90 days to view their opinions, send it to Congress or what have you. So it's not turned into law, but he has overturned the net neutrality law. Go ahead, Greg.
I just want to jump in there for clarification because that's part of the problem with this whole entire issue is the wording that's being used. What's on the table is to repeal net neutrality.
Right, exactly.
So the law is net neutrality.
Right, which is what Obama put in place.
Yes.
And Trump is overturning, and the law will be to repeal that, yes.
Yes, so keep in mind that word because that's the part that no one focuses on. They're trying to repeal a law that's in place already. And what's in place is net neutrality. So everybody hears net neutrality and they love it because I want a neutral internet. I don't want anyone to own it. I don't want anyone to have control over it because it belongs to the people, not any one institution or government. But that's what's on the table is to take that away. But they never talk about it in that frame of reference. They always just talk about net neutrality. And so they give the impression that that's what everyone's going to be voting for is net neutrality, when in fact it's to repeal the net neutrality. Exactly.
And that's why all this, like so many laws and so many things that happen in our world, whether it's intentional or not, that we'll take that off the table. We'll just say that that's what it is. It's confusing because it isn't, the terminology is not clear. And so that's why it's important to talk about this because this is an enormous, big deal. It's going to affect all of us.
I just want our listeners to know that this morning my co-host had to really school me to get me to understand because I was very confused. Are we for it? Are we against it? What is it? Are we for net neutrality? Are we against it? What happens if we have it? What happens if we don't have it? And once they kind of brought me up to speed and they showed me a couple videos to watch, I get it. I don't think most people understand the dire consequences if we do away with net neutrality.
Now you would be a perfect example of how the media is fooling people. Because in your explanation and understanding of the whole issue, you did not use the word repeal at all. Mm-hmm. And so therefore, the whole entire issue is upside down.
Yes.
Right.
Everyone does want net neutrality. But that's not what's on the table is to keep net neutrality.
Exactly. That's a very good point.
To do away with it.
Absolutely right.
And once I was made to understand what could happen, the possibilities of things that could happen if we do away with net neutrality. I don't think the average person understands it. Really, there will be dire consequences.
Yes, especially for the little person like us, or the new business owner, the new corporation that's struggling out there trying to create some competition. In essence, what this will do is it allows the corporate big guys that are out there right now to basically rule in even a greater degree than they already do and charge a lot more money for a service that everybody already gets. And there was an example that we were sharing with each other last night that was excellent on YouTube about, in fact, if our listeners have a chance, I guess you could just go to YouTube and look up Burger King Neutrality or something like that.
That was a great example of what happens if we do away with net neutrality.
Right. It's like going into Burger King and ordering a Whopper, having to wait 28 minutes or pay $28 for it because...
If you want it now.
Exactly. If you want it now, you can't because you don't have the premium whatever.
The premium services.
Yes, the
Right.
premium
Service
services,
that-
exactly.
and to kind of simplify what you're saying is this whole repealing of the net neutrality is creating highways on the internet. There's a fast lane and there's a slow lane. So it depends on, and there's even a middle lane, but it depends on how much you can pay for it.
Right.
And the example in the Burger King analogy was you walk up to the counter, you order a burger. And right now we're accustomed to getting that burger immediately. As soon as they can make it, it's ready.
Right.
Well, in the Burger King video that they made, the people would order food, and then depending on how much they were willing to pay determined how long they had to wait in order to get that food. So if you wanted it right away like you're accustomed to, then you had to pay $26 for that Burger King Whopper. And if you were a little patient, right, then it was half the price. It was only $14, right? But if you wanted it at regular price, which was say $3 as an example, then you had to wait actually 25 minutes to get that burger, even though it's ready and sitting on the shelf. You just couldn't get it until your time came.
Right.
It's a great video that makes it very simple to understand what happens, what will happen if we do
Right.
away with net neutrality.
To which some people might say, well, it's okay, I'm not in a hurry. I just, I guess I can wait because I can't afford to pay that extra money. Except that this will impact so many things. Think about it. If your home is set up, perhaps your fire alarms are set up, that you'll be notified if you're away from home, or the fire department, or you've got what are those, a surveillance or what have you, that's notified the police department. If you have an intruder in your home or what have you. If you are, just using this example, if you are on the slow because you don't want to pay that extra $28 for the service, then those services are not going to be notified very quickly. They're going to have to wait. You're going to have to wait. Now, your house might burn down in the meantime. The burglars might get away with everything you ever had. And that's just an example. That's just one of the things that
But it's a great one. You can take it into the health industry.
Right.
And look at the senior citizen environment.
Right.
Where people that still live at home, they have things in their home where the internet will notify people, assistants, nurses, doctors, whatever, if there's a condition.
Right.
But if they can't afford the fast lane internet, then that information may not get there in time to save their life.
Exactly.
Right. People are heart monitors that are being monitored by the internet. Same thing. I mean, that's really important. That's stuff you need to know now.
Right.
I was talking to a woman I met out walking my dog this morning who is a CERT volunteer, and she was at a meeting with other CERT volunteers, one of whom had been to Sandy Hook to help with the catastrophe there, and had said that a few, not all, but many of those children could have been saved had the response been quicker. And so this is the case with so many things that we depend on that speed. Our lives depend on that speed.
Quick response saves lives.
Exactly. Quick response is everything. And if it is an issue, say our telephones will also be impacted by that. I don't know about 911, but if we're calling it from a cell phone, my guess is that is somehow going through the internet services.
Well, some people's home phones go through the internet.
Oh, that's true too.
But
Yes.
I would think that emergency services would be neutral in this, where they would automatically, or they actually have the cities that provide the emergency services will be paying those high prices for. So therefore, there goes our taxes are going to have to go up to compensate for the city being able to pay for the services necessary. to keep us safe.
Right, and those are, I know these probably seem like, oh, these are extreme examples, but no, they're really not. These are probably some of the more common examples of how we can be impacted. There are 1,000 different ways that we haven't even thought of that will impact us, and I just don't get the logic. Well, I do get the logic. It's big corporations making pleas for control. I mean, that's what it boils down to.
Exactly that. And, one of the presentations we all watched in preparation for the show talked about how Comcast was in negotiations with Verizon. And Comcast is a major distributor of internet services, whereas Verizon would be a carrier, so they would work under them. So in the negotiations, or while they were negotiating, their internet service that they were providing to Verizon just kept going down and down and down and down at a slower speed the whole time they were negotiating. But as soon as Verizon agreed to the terms and everything, all of a sudden their speed just doubled, And of course, that's all behind the scenes, right? We don't get to see any of that.
Right.
But these are the controls that they actually have over the internet, and they use them. And a perfect example was shown. Another side note to that is that, iPhone is in... or Apple, I'm sorry. Apple is in court right now because they've been caught slowing down the phone services on purpose.
And older phones.
Slowing down the services and abilities of older phones to encourage people to go buy new phones.
Right.
Shame on them.
This is all manipulation of services, right? And this is what's really on the table with the big boys versus the little guys.
Right, and this also stifles, in my opinion, entrepreneurialism, because an entrepreneur has a way to perhaps have a better internet provider in competition with the big boys, with Verizon, and there's a lot of them out there. There's a lot of little players out there, but if they can't afford to compete with the big boys, then they don't have a fair chance at playing in this market either.
Yeah. So effectively, doing away with net neutrality strangles any new competition.
Yes, it does. It really does.
And that's a perfect example of what this whole debate is all about. It's all about controls.
So, in effect, that would become a violation of the RICO laws, wouldn't it, then? If you're strangling out your competition?
I would think more so the monopoly laws, not necessarily RICO laws. But the monopoly laws is what comes to my mind. But because I'm not a legal expert, don't hold me to the fire on that one.
Neither am I.
I don't even know what RICO law is, so...
Well, that's the RICO laws are the laws that came about in the Al Capone days, where they used them to monitor the habits of the gangsters and get them indirectly. I didn't see you rob this guy,
right?
But I can tell because you and other guys that are completely affiliated with him on a daily basis are interacting with this guy, and he said that you make him pay rent. We can't see him.
But you're not reporting it on the your taxes.
Exactly.
Okay.
But so
that's why a lot of them were brought down by tax evasion.
And this is, more people can relate to it with the gang injunctions that are involved. Just because you live in the neighborhood where this gang exists, then you are indirectly associated with the gang. And so if you do anything wrong, they can say you're in that gang.
Okay. Like politicians.
Just like because you live in that neighborhood, right?
Right.
So that's kind of like the RICO laws.
Okay, I get it now.
Money laundering,
Thank you for
extortion, all that kind of stuff all fall under those RICO laws, and that's how they go after people.
I appreciate that, because I'm sure I'm not the only person out there that wasn't familiar with these. I know now that you've explained it, but I'm sure I wasn't familiar with the acronym, so thank you for that. Thank you for bringing that term to our awareness, Laura. So anyway, yes, that's what's happening with net neutrality. It's a very, very big deal, and you think it's not impactful right now. I know I've been guilty of that. I've been negligent in paying attention to it to any great degree because it was so confusing. So I didn't pay attention and believing that we would be taken care of, and we were. But now we've got a whole nother set of issues in front of us with this being repealed.
Well, I think we need to do what happened last time when we tried to make sure that net neutrality would stay in. You need to write, email, call
Yes.
the FCC, every politician in the book. You can blanket it, bring down the servers, because that's what happened last time. That's how important this is.
Right.
Not only to you, to your children and your grandchildren.
Yes.
Everything they do for school and a lot of things at work, it's all internet now.
Call the FCC.
Yes,
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You need to just deluge them.
It was impactful before. Believe it or not, people do have a voice, and once in a while, we're actually listened to.
You need to be upset enough to get off
Exactly.
your couch and get in your computer chair and
Right.
send some emails.
You can also go online to YouTube and Google John Oliver and net neutrality. He does a very good stick on it that explains it. We're going to take a break. We'll be right back with more of the Broad Perspective in just a moment. Stay tuned.
Hello, I am His Majesty the Soul, King of Mauritius, and I invite you to help me build the world's planetary egg, an ecological geophysical galleon. It's approximately 180 acres, and it is home to 3,000 researchers from around the world. It is the world's first sovereign planetary independent jurisdiction that has the capability of advancing and progressing and fast-tracking every aspect of innovation, helping us redefine what it means to be human in a new world. So check out our website. It's www.mauricii.com. MORACEAE.com. I look forward to seeing you, and please contribute, donate to the GoFundMe page. I look forward to meeting you, and let's build the planetary egg. Thank you.
Welcome back to the Broad Perspective on the Broad Perspective Network. I'm Vivian Komori.
And I'm Greg Barnes.
And I'm Laura Feliz.
And we're continuing our discussion on net neutrality, trying to get some clarity for our listeners and somewhat for ourselves. But Greg brought up a really good point during the break that this whole net neutrality thing has been going on for a long time. And I remember over the years hearing the words net neutrality, but because I was so confused on what it was and I did not put forth the effort to understand it, I now realize that I need to. But Greg found some good information. Go ahead, Greg. You want to share that with us?
Yeah, the thought crossed my mind that while we were talking about this is that, but none of this is new. And so during the break, I just did a quick search on attempts at governments to control the internet. And the result that I got was from the Activist Post, and the title of the article is 10 Failed Attempts by the Government to Control the Internet. And I'm just going to go over briefly what I found, which started in 1996, which, of course, that's when everyone got computers, and that's when the desktop was made and everyone started getting computers. They were already trying to put in the controls over the internet in a somewhat of the senses, when you think of North Korea's internet and China's internet, we know that it's all censored and controlled. The government doesn't allow the people to see anything except for what they want them to see, right? So the United States was already trying to put some of those controls in place.
But don't we already have that with mainstream media?
Well, yes, but not to be compared to the internet, because they're rivals, actually. That's what made us evolve.
I'm making a poor joke.
Right. Okay.
That's all right.
So all the way back in 1996, there was the Communications Decency Act.
Okay.
Listen to the wording of the name. Now, who wouldn't want communications decency, right?
Right.
Okay,
Yes.
Please note that, right? Of course, but that act was all about attempting to regulate the internet under the fighting force of keeping pornography away from everyone. But of course, in doing so, now I get control over
Right.
the internet. So that was one attempt.
Right.
The second attempt was in 1998 with the Child Online Protection Act. Now, who wouldn't want to protect children,
Sure.
right? But of course, under the guise of trying to keep our kids safe, they were attempting to get control over the internet. Right? Going with number 3, Internet School Filtering Act in 1998. Again, using children to get controls over the internet because we don't want kids at school, surfing and getting porn or learning how to shoot up a school, right? So we wanted to have controls in place to prevent that. Well, of course, it failed also because the main objective is just getting control.
Right.
Number 4, Deleting Online Predators Act. Again, who doesn't want to get rid of predators from the internet, right? You see the consistency here on how they label these acts in order to try to get control over the internet.
Right.
Number 5, and there's only 10, by the way, so I'm almost done, halfway there. Intellectual Property Enforcement Act. So now, and of course, this is in 2007. So everyone's very active on the internet, and everyone has intellectual properties now. I have my websites on there, and I want them protected, and people are doing commerce and real estate and all these other things, and they want what they're doing protected. So, of course, they come up with the Intellectual Property Act that everybody should support just because of the name of it. But again, it was just another attempt to get control over the internet. Number 6, Cybersecurity Act. And this is 2009. Well, of course, everyone's being hacked. Everyone's,
Doxing.
doxing. There's a new word of the day. Everyone's getting doxed, right? Which is, by the way, when someone hacks into your personal equipment and gets your personal information and then posts it online to either blackmail you or defamate your character.
All right, defame you. Yeah.
Defame your character. Oh, I wasn't in the proper context. Okay, good. But anyway, so under those guys, because if everyone remembers 2009, 2010, that was the rave, was hack, right? And so they were really selling all the software, McAfee and Kaspersky and all these, to keep everyone computer safe, right? So of course they used that to try to get control of the internet again, but it failed. And now we're at number 7, which is protecting cyberspace as a national asset. So now we got to protect against the international hackers, right?
Okay.
They took it to the next level, and this was in 2010, which is just a year later. First, we want to protect everybody at home. Now we got to protect everybody from the Chinese hackers and all the rest of that. Number 8, combating online infringement and counterfeiting acts. These guys are clever. I got to give them their props. Who wouldn't want to keep people from infringing on other people's properties and, counterfeit websites? Other people pretending to catfishing is what it's called.
I've had all that.
Sure, I'm sure a lot of people have experienced it. But again, they try to use that problem to get control of the internet, and it failed. Number 9, protect the IP Act. Well, for those who don't know, your IP is your electronic signature from your individual electronics. Your phone has one, your computer has one, your tablets have one. That's their first and last name. And there's actually IP number that identifies all electronics. So when you go online, they know exactly who you are. Well, the clever people out there in cyber world have invented tools where they can mask their IP addresses and be anonymous.
Right.
Or they can pretend to be someone else's IP. So I can break the law, and when they look up that IP, they go to Vivian's house instead of mine.
Right.
Right, to go arrest her, right? And so anyway, they use scenarios like that to put fear out there to try to get people, but they failed again. And then this one is 2011, Stop Online Privacy Act, which again, they're using fear that I'm comfortable with saying generated fear through the FBI to cause people to be fearful of their information being stolen. This is why we have the new companies now. What's it called? Lock something.
Oh, LifeLock.
LifeLock, exactly.
Which uses Experian which we know got hacked big time, majorly. So how
Yes.
secure is LifeLock?
Yeah,
Yeah, anybody that says that they can keep your internet or your private information secure, it's a lie. They may not know they're lying, but it's an impossibility.
Yeah, they may believe it for the moment.
That's correct. And that was 2011. And up to date now, what's been on the table is another act. It's called the CISPA, CISPA. Don't ask me to break down that acronym because it's been a while. But that's been on the table. It's gone up and then shot down. It's gone up and been revised and then shoot it down again. So they've been playing with that. And now we have net neutrality.
Right.
And it's just another attempt for the big boys to get
It's-
control over the internet.
It's the same attempt as the before mentioned, all 10 of those last items that you mentioned. This is net neutrality, just with a different name, with the different guys trying to do the same thing all these others are mentioned, which boils down to control. Boils down to control and money, like it always does. So I think for those of us that are now understanding the importance of this, sometimes it takes a long time for things to soak in with me.
Well, I have to just show you again how clever they are. Even myself just now, when I brought up net neutrality, I didn't bring up the fact that it's about repealing net neutrality. See,
Yes.
this is exactly how
Yes.
clever they are.
Keep people confused, and they don't care.
Subconsciously,
Yeah.
through the constant repetition, net neutrality, net neutrality, net neutrality, we forget about the main word, which is repealing.
Which is what we're facing right now.
Yes.
Right
That's
now
what we're
we've
facing.
had net neutrality. We all have access at whatever speed we have through our providers. We have access to everything. And also net neutrality, they can block us from seeing certain things. Websites that are web people are willing to pay more will be able to, their sites will be able to be seen. Those who are, once again, the young entrepreneur who's just trying to get their thing out there, they're not going to be able to afford to pay the huge fees that some of these big people can pay, and they're going to be at a disadvantage once again. So net neutrality, I think, has worked well for us for the most part. Of course, it's not perfect, nothing is, but we're about ready to lose that, and then we're going to go, hey, what happened? How did this come about? And there will be.
And again, I know a lot of parents won't like this, but as far as what your kids are doing on the internet or with smartphones or whatever, don't expect the government to do your job for you. You
Right.
need to pay more attention. You need to monitor what your kids are watching. I mean, in the early days, if you sat and watched TV with your kids, you could provide some context as to what was going on television shows.
True, because we only had a few channels too.
Yes,
They're
that's
going to be
true.
watching Dennis the Menace
true.
or Father Knows Best or Lassie
Leave it to Beaver.
and Leave It to Beaver.
Yeah, there were only 13 numbers on that
Dial.
dial for changing channels.
But we can't leave out my favorite, my all-time favorite, Flipper.
Oh, Flipper, yes.
Am I dated now? I'm
Yes.
dated. Now you know how old I am.
Absolutely. And it wasn't quite as scary as it is now. Now kids can watch. Well, I shudder to think at all the things they have access to. And it's,
Well, Orange is the New Black is a heavy one.
yeah.
All the children, the kids love that show.
I've only seen it once.
I've
and
never seen it.
the one time I saw it, I wouldn't want my kids watching it.
Right.
No, I mean, it was...
It's a raving show on Netflix.
Yeah. So it's a crazy world out there, but we need to be paying attention. And go ahead, Greg.
Which, by the way, is another great example because it takes high-speed streaming in order to do that. And
It's
so
true.
with the repeal of net neutrality, that gives the internet providers power over the content distributors like Netflix and Hulu and these other companies that are putting out movies. It actually stifles their production because not everyone will be able to afford the new rates that they will have to charge to
Right.
compensate for having high-speed services.
And we've all had issues. I think one time or another, say for instance, we're watching something on TV over the internet, and all of a sudden it has to stop and buffer, and you see the little wheel turning round and round and round, and you wait. That's a slowdown in the internet. That's a buffer. Well, if that's annoying, You can put up with it once in a while, but with net neutrality, unless you're paying the big bucks, you're going to be watching that little wheel turn around a lot.
Way more than the movie.
Yeah, exactly. If you even have an option for that movie. You see, that's where the real programming begins, is because you don't have the options. You won't have nearly the options to visit lots of websites, different websites, unless they're willing to pay. And I like to visit the obscure websites, the ones that they don't have any money to pay, because they have good information. So it's very interesting how this is going to play out.
You know, that also brings up another issue where I just envision there are big rivals to Google and YouTube now, where it's where everyone gets their information from. There's new rivals because Google and YouTube and Facebook have all pretty much come together and have decided that they are going to be champions of real information, meaning whatever they deem as fake news, they make it hard for you to find.
Yeah, exactly.
And so now new rivals have
That's true.
grown. There's DTube, there's Vimeo, there's other content distributors that are rivaling now, which will have to pay huge big bucks now to be that rival.
Exactly. And there's this part of me that thinks in some ways, okay, that's okay, because there's a lot of crap that I wouldn't have a bit of a problem with it being filtered out. But the minute you agree to some of it, then you agree
it's
to
a
more
very
of it.
slippery
It's
slope.
a slippery slope. So you have to hopefully hope that people would have some, what's the word, prudence or...
Criteria.
Yeah, for what
Which
they
none
watch
of
and what
them
they
have.
accept. Yeah.
Well, I'm sorry. I jumped ahead of you, but I was thinking in my head that the Facebook, the Google, and YouTube, they haven't posted any criteria for determining what is real or fake. They just get to decide
which
behind the
again,
scenes.
which is according to their own ideology.
Right.
Yeah.
So, well,
Problem that-
exactly.
So now you have a form of censorship that has developed, and now with the repeal of net neutrality, they have a stronger arm to do it with.
And I think there should be censorship if someone's posting something, they've done doxed into my private stuff and they're getting ready to post it. And if Google or Facebook or any of those could catch that and stop it, I'd be all for it. But I don't think that's what it's going to be used for. So with that, we're going to take another break. We'll be back in just a moment. Stay tuned.
The 12th hour. A show literally about everything.
Everything.
A candid discussion between friends about their different perspectives on what they think may be going on.
Or what is not going on.
With so many different areas of information being given out, we attempt to put together the puzzle pieces to create the broad perspective of the whole picture.
Welcome back to The Broad Perspective on the Broad Perspective Network. I'm Vivian Komori.
And I'm Greg Barnes.
I'm Laura Feliz.
And we're continuing this discussion on net neutrality. Laura had a good thought there on the break she's going to share with us now.
Well, we're talking about doing away with net neutrality and the fact that our government will be able to decide what we see and what we don't see. And isn't this just a further example of, and I'm not saying that there aren't things on the internet that I don't want to see and I don't want children to see, but it's another example of absolute power corrupts absolutely. I mean, what was that, Greg? The Stanford experiments that show when people are given power to punish others, they will gleefully, once they get used to it, they become accustomed to it and they continue to abuse.
That would be a great example. The Stanford experiment was done at in Berkeley at the college, and what they did is they just took a randomly selected group of students and decided to pay them, and we're going to give them college credits to participate in this experiment. And let's say it was 20 people, and they cut it right in half. They made 10 people inmates, and they made 10 people guards.
That one.
And they assigned them duties, and they had rules that they all had to go by, and then they just let it run live. They just let it go. And they were daily briefs where they just slowly ramped up the authority of the police officers and then they just let them go. They just told them what their rules were, and they just let them go. Well, at the end of the experiment, which lasted 2.5 weeks, I think it was, almost 3 weeks, there was a jailbreak attempt. There were attempted suicide from the inmates, and the police guys were just rampant with physical abuse. And all of this just happened organically. So it's an example of how when you get authority and power, it's almost a natural occurrence because of the dopamine effect that you begin to abuse it.
Well, and looks, of course, this is kind of off subject, but you're absolutely right. And this is what happens, like, say, in Hollywood with what's going on now. We've seen how people in Hollywood have had power and how they have abused that with their treatment of women, at least at this, and men as well. And so it's just an issue where power taking to a whole other level, people get caught up in it. They get drunk on power.
They get drunk on the powers, exactly. And we're bringing this all up just to say that this is how important this repealing of the net neutrality is. Mm-hmm. And that's why we want to encourage everyone to take that proactive stance and just stop the phone right now. Just put everything down and make it happen. Write that letter electronically, physically, make the phone call, whatever. Call the FCC and let them know that you do not want the repeal of net neutrality.
Remember that. Remember those words. The repeal of net neutrality. Because if you call and say, I don't want net neutrality, you got it wrong.
You got it wrong.
Yeah. At least that's our opinion. Now, you may be a Verizon corporate board member. I don't know, and you may want it. But for the most part, we think that we share the same viewpoints as most of our listeners, that we like the freedom of the internet, and we like the freedom to make our own choices on what we listen to and how fast we want to listen to it.
If you can't remember what you're for net neutrality or against net neutrality, just say, well, what could they say instead if they can't remember? If they get confused?
Repeal.
That's the word to remember. Repeal.
Repeal.
Okay, but if they say repeal net neutrality, that sounds like we're against net neutrality. You have to be very, very careful.
Good
exactly.
point.
That's what I'm saying.
Exactly.
We want to keep the internet neutral.
What's on the table is
the repealing
of. So I see your point.
Yes.
You have to be very careful how we word this. See how easy it is to get confused.
Yes, exactly.
So the complete sentence, so that the thought cannot be confused,
simply
is that I do not want the repeal of net neutrality.
Or how about keep net neutrality?
I want to keep.
There we go. Let's keep it simple. There we go.
Keep net neutrality. There you go.
Yeah.
That's the campaign.
Just keep net neutrality.
Right.
There you go. 3 words. Keep net neutrality. That's short and simple.
Yeah.
There we go.
I think keep's an easy word.
That's the campaign. It's a key word. Keep net neutrality.
Yeah. I think that's important. And once again, you may not realize how important this is right now, but you will. You will. If this is allowed to go through. Because
I think a lot of people don't really understand how many things and systems run on the internet.
Right. So we are so internet dependent these days. I think about that. I think about we had a situation where accidentally a person took down our cable wire, which controls our internet. So not only do we not have television, I can live without television, but boy, not having the internet was tough. It also took down our phone lines, but the main thing that I missed the most was the internet, the ability to do what I needed to do on the internet. And that was a real lesson to me. I thought, wow, I guess I am super duper dependent. And I don't think any of us really realize how deep that dependency goes.
I don't think we understand it either, to what degree.
Right.
You know, I grew up in a home that had so many kids. My parents bought sets of encyclopedias and books like that, so my mom wouldn't have to keep running people to the library.
Sure. And I know I've given away all of our encyclopedias because they take up a lot of shelf space, and I can, 10 seconds, and I can find out whatever I need.
Hopelessly outdated now.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, you'd have to buy a new set or the updates every year, and encyclopedias were expensive. Mm-hmm. They really were.
Well, that was the big business back then.
Yeah.
Like a door-to-door salesman selling encyclopedias.
It was a good investment.
And it was,
for
it was a valuable thing. man, I so appreciated those encyclopedias and being able to go to them for reference and use the information in there. Very grateful. I got a set free from shopping at the time. I think it was King Supers and
A lot of supermarkets
Yeah.
have those promotions for
Yeah.
encyclopedias and dishes and
save your
flatware
receipts and
and
you get A and B, and next receipts you get C and D, and you just want to get your whole set.
I remember my mom buying dish soap to get the free towels or glasses or whatever in them.
I used to do all that stuff. Yeah, I guess that tells how old I am. You
Yeah.
don't see any of that anymore, do you?
No, you
Tell
don't.
anyone.
But that's how dependent we are on the internet. That's all we're trying to say. And we want our children to have that advantage at school. We don't want our children to have to do a paper and not be able to access the data that they need to do their homework and to look up their research. And that goes for us too with our work projects. We don't want to be stifled or held back or tied up in any way. We want to be able to get what we need to get. We've been spoiled, I suppose, because we've been able to.
How many of us can complete a project of any type of thing, whether it's woodworking or some plumbing or some, sewing something or
Yes.
cooking something, and we're not an expert, but we can get the answers quickly
Right.
on the internet and complete a project. But we're not experts, but we have the ability to access the information and
Exactly.
do something. If the internet's taken away, how many people are just suddenly far more helpless than they used to be?
Exactly. My brother changed the cabin filter in my car a couple weeks ago, and because he said my car smelled funky, and so we needed to get the cabin filter changed. So he went online to figure out how to do it. It was of course much harder than he thought it was going to be, but nonetheless, that's how he did it. He just went online, looked at my model to make a car, replaced cabin filter, and it had the tutorial right there. So that's huge. That's a really, really great thing, because then he could do it and I didn't have to take it to a dealership, and my car smells better.
There you go. Not to mention you're not smelling or breathing the toxic mold that builds up over time.
Exactly, all
Yeah.
that. But that's just one example, and I know my husband does the same thing. If he has to work on one of our cars, he'll look up something online to see a particular problem or what have you, and it's explained. So we're very dependent on our internet. We want access to everything that we want to be able to access. Now, granted, there's stuff I wish it wasn't available, but it is, and I hope that myself and my family has the wherewithal, the decency to just avoid all that. They don't go in search of these horrible things. I guess we have to have some sort of faith. Go ahead, Greg.
Now, before we wrap up this subject, I think it's very important that you guys hear the biggest incentive of all.
Okay.
The reason why you want to keep net neutrality is because the cost will go up for the broad perspective,
Yeah.
and we may go away. And you don't want that to happen.
You're absolutely right.
You don't want that to happen.
And if it does go up, we will go away.
We are cutting edge,
Yeah.
and articles are coming out all the time talking about what we've talked about 6 months ago.
Right. That's the truth. Yeah, we get a lot of validation. Our listeners will go, man, I remember you guys talking about this a long time ago. There it is. Yeah. We do our homework. We try really hard to stay up to date on things, but this has been happening a lot, and the broad perspective is on the cutting edge. So
I think we go off the rails every once in a while and throw some wacky humor in it. But you have to laugh at some of this stuff. You have to keep everything in perspective. I mean, because it's too easy to cry about a lot of stuff that's
Yeah.
going on in the world today. So let's throw some humor in there that doesn't negate the seriousness or the importance of some of this stuff. But let's try to find a little balance here.
okay.
Well, I think we should use this time to talk about another humorous issue, which is I'm going to say issues now, which is the dropping of the U.S. dollar, the bond market hemorrhaging continuously, and using Canada, what's happening in Canada, to really bring home the dangers that we're facing right now.
This is true. We've talked about this on the most recent shows, but it is something that's going to be repetitive because it is changing rapidly, and people do need to be paying attention. This can have an effect on all of us. If you are saving for retirement, if you are retired, if you have any investments in these avenues, it's something you need to pay attention to. So, should we go ahead and tackle it now before the?
Well, we've got
Okay,
a few.
go for it, Greg.
Want
Tell
to take
us.
an early break, Soundman? No.
No?
Okay, so
Okay.
let's do it. We got time. Because I want to bring up this issue because I almost forgot about it, which is even more important than the issues I just brought up. Is that the new Fed president
Yes.
and the president were at the meeting in Davos.
Okay.
And in that meeting, the position of the United States was discussed.
Okay.
And what the conclusion was is that the United States is now pro weak dollar versus
Yes.
pro standard or strong dollar.
Yeah, Trump announced that in his campaign. I remember.
Yes.
I remember him distinctly saying the dollar was overvalued. It was
Right.
too high.
Well, now what that means, though, is that the Federal Reserve has a green light to continue to devalue the dollar.
Right.
Which means
They'll raise interest rates.
Here comes. No, it's not raising interest rates. It would be not raising interest rates and printing more money, or the United States borrowing more money, which is going to devalue the dollar.
Okay.
But of course, that's the opposite of what the Federal Reserve has talked about, which is raising rates, right?
Right.
They said they were going to tighten their balance sheets, which is the opposite of easing their balance sheets, and easing is code word for printing more money or loaning more money to the United States.
Easing, well, we're at what, quantitative easing number 5?
We'll be at 4.
Four,
So this will
okay.
be technically number 4.
Okay.
And they'll probably name it something different just so it
Yeah.
doesn't appear to be the same thing, but that's what's happening. And I think that explains why the U.S. stock market is on an upward trajectory that's unchallenged with very, very little volatility, meaning it hardly ever comes down, but it continues to just go straight up.
So to continue, excuse me, quantitative easing, and it hasn't done what they've said it was going to done every time before. So we're going to continue doing the same thing, hoping we're going to get different results.
Yes,
Yeah,
gasoline on the fire.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Definition of insanity.
Definition of insanity.
Yes, we're going to continue to throw gasoline on the fire and hope it goes out.
So,
I hope everybody's hearing. These are the people that we put in charge of, and we keep them in charge. Things will not change unless enough Americans start raising a stink. Really, you need to seriously start raising a stink.
well, okay, there might be those who support the weak dollar. They understand that having a weak dollar might bring more abilities to sell our goods and services overseas. I mean, that's one of the logics.
But they're looking at a short-term results with long-term dire consequences.
But we are short-term short-term I can't talk.
Short-term thinkers.
There you go.
Say
Thank
that
you.
again 10 times real fast.
I want what I want, and I want it right now.
Exactly.
No matter what the consequences are for later.
Yeah,
Exactly.
This is the same things that's been going on for a long time. We kick the can down to our children and our grandchildren.
There
We're
you
leaving
go.
a worse world for them. Isn't it about time we try to leave things better than the way we found them?
Or is it too late?
I don't.
We definitely passed the point of no return long ago
I think
in
we
2016.
Yeah.
I don't think that it's not. That's a double negative. I think it's still possible to improve things. Yes, I think some things are going to fail. Definitely, I think there's no point in saving a lot of things, but in the meantime, we can start thinking of ways to make things better.
Okay, well, we can always try. We're going to take a break. We'll be back with the final segment of The Broad Perspective in just a moment. Stay tuned.
BPN. Join the awakening.
The Broad Perspective Network is a portal designed to reveal a new perspective and reality to those who wish to know the truth about the world we live in and our role in it.
BPN. See beyond the illusion.
Welcome back to The Broad Perspective on the Broad Perspective Network. I'm Vivian Komori.
And I'm Greg Barnes.
And I'm Laura Feliz.
And this is our final segment. We've been talking about the weaker dollar, and it is going down, down, down. Now, but that also means gold is going up, up, up. and that precious metals are going up, up, up. So if you haven't been listening to us in the past and you haven't been stocking up on precious metals, you're going to pay more for it now. Doesn't mean it's too late. Still would be advisable, I suppose, to get some. But in the meantime, that's the way it works. The dollar goes down, the value of precious metals goes up. And that's what we're seeing happen.
Now, we talked about the bond market, we talked about the dollar, but what I didn't talk about is the price of oil and what it's doing.
Yes.
Right now we're at, we've broke through some of the, what do they call them, the pressure points that were holding the resistance points. That's the technical term. We've broken through some of the resistance points for oil to go into a bull market, meaning it's on an upward trajectory. And right now we're at $66 a barrel or so. What that translates to now, because even on the wholesale level, we're looking at $1.9293 somewhere in there on the wholesale level. So if you add another dollar to that nationally, that puts everyone right around $3 a barrel. And then you got the taxes associated with all that. So now the new pressure that's added to the system is now it's going to cost everyone more money to commute because the price of oil is going up. So that also means that if it's going to cost me more money to put gasoline and diesel in my trucks, then that means that whatever I'm delivering is going to cost a little bit more.
Right.
So what we're seeing now is because of the weaker dollar, which makes the price of oil go up, now we get to see the inflation that they've been hiding. The Federal Reserve always talks about this 2% of inflation that they're trying to achieve, when in fact we're seeing 10 and 11% of inflation every single year. And it's just hidden in many ways. Some things go up in inflation and some things come down, but it depends on what's valuable to you. I need, say, groceries, whereas another company may need fuel, or they may need just, okay, here's a perfect example. What I'm trying to say is televisions. The price of televisions have gone down dramatically because people don't really need them. Mm-hmm. But what we do need is rapidly raising in its price. Food, gasoline, and travel expenses, things like that.
Doesn't that just seem a little odd?
But what's not happening is no one's getting a raise. Mm-hmm. And that's where the equation becomes imbalanced. And this is why we're at the highest point of poverty ever in history. We're
and more
way
and more
beyond,
people are still losing their jobs.
Yes, and we're way beyond Great Depression levels.
And the thing is, that's not being discussed. In fact, all we're hearing about is prosperity. All we're hearing about is how prosperous, all the jobs, all the income. The stock market is so much higher. It's higher than it's ever been. We're hearing about all the good things. We don't hear about all the people that have now are homeless, that don't have money for food, that don't have money to buy this higher price in gasoline to get to their jobs if they have one. We're not, none of that. That's we don't hear any of that.
And then you have the new tax reforms that have just went into effect, right? Well, all of that are cuts in Social Security. That's cuts in Medicaid, and there's cuts in Section 8 stuff, which are all subsidies to help people live in this tough environment. Right. And as those things get rougher for those people, what are the end results to that?
It affects everybody.
Yeah, it affects everyone. That's right. I gave this example to my wife the other day. I said, honey, here's why this is important. Because we're in an airplane and the pilot is drunk and a whole lot of other people are sick on this plane. If we stay on this plane, eventually it's going to affect us. The pilot's going to pass out, right? Mm-hmm. And the other people are trying to get us sick as well. What are you going to do about it? You can't just sit on the plane and think everything's going to be fine and we're going to land and everything's okay. We got to start taking actions. We got to start building parachutes.
Right.
Right? Because that's what's necessary to survive this environment that we're in right now.
There's so many things that astound me. It still astounds me that the stock market is climbing. It astounds me actually that the price of gasoline is climbing, because I think that we've overproduced, and I think we still overproduce, and I think that we use less. We have less dependency, not in big percentages, but it will continue to be less.
Well, think about it this way. Since we're using less, that means they're moving less product.
Right.
So in order for their bottom line to stay the same, they have to charge more for it.
Well, that's true.
So that's why the prices are going up.
Okay.
They're moving less, so they have to raise the price to make that same amount of money or more.
Yeah, but still supply and demand. Go ahead, Laura.
See, this whole thing is, I want to make this amount of money, and if I can't make this amount of money, I'm going to charge everybody more because I want to make this amount of money.
Yes. So logic is being thrown out the roof, and it's all about self-preservation, which is another telltale sign of a declining empire.
Yeah. Always looking out for yourself.
That's right. The rats are jumping ship.
Well, just like,
and they're taking everything they can carry with them.
Just like, what was it, in the 80s and 90s, they were rationing gas. You had to go to the gas station on alternate days, depending upon if your license was an odd or even number.
That was the
something.
mid-'70s.
Yeah, mid-'70s.
Yes.
Okay. Well, when you get people to cut down their consumption of some sort of utility like gas or the water shortage, what do? They raise the rates. So that's manipulation. It's like, I want to make what I want to make, and if I can't make it, I'm going to charge you more. So,
Yeah, but then people have the option of whether or not they want to pay it, and that's where the whole thing of checks and balances should, in theory, play out. So in other words, well, I have to now I have to pay much more for gas for my product, so I'm going to raise the price of my product. But my customer is going to say, well, gee, so-and-so over here isn't doing that. I'm going to leave you and go with them because I need to save money too. So there's a lot of variables that play into this, and it's hard to know what...
I absolutely admit my naivety when it comes to understand market numbers and all this stuff. I totally admit it. I've tried to figure it out, and I can't. So with that admission, it just, from where I'm sitting trying to learn about it, it just seems like the whole thing is rigged.
You think?
There's probably some truth there. It's probably not all of it, but
I think there is some truth to it. I don't know to the degree, because I think for every person that's trying to rig it, there's somebody trying to unrig it.
I agree with that too.
And so it does feel very rigged. But this is what we're talking about, bringing it back to net neutrality.
Yeah.
That's a rigging. That is a rigging. No, there's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. Net neutrality is a rigging of control. And so that's what net neutrality is. It's a rigging for a certain select group of, in this case, businesses that'll be able to control what we can see, hear, and do.
That is correct.
That's the bottom line.
That's what the repealing of net neutrality is all about.
Yeah, thank you for repealing.
Putting the fix on the internet so that they can manipulate it to their benefits, despite how it's going to affect society.
Right.
Exactly.
Right.
And
go ahead, Laura.
Keep net neutrality.
Right. Thank you for saying that. And that is important. And then I know people aren't always ones to take action. I get that. We only take action when we really personally feel the threat. But once again, we're telling you, if you're not feeling it right now, you will if this continues on like it is, and you're going to be so sorry you didn't take action.
All human beings by nature are resistant to change. That's very clear. You have to look at yourself and look at your neighbors and your friends and everybody. We are resistant to change, but when we get pushed to the edge, we can and we will change. You know what? This world is changing so fast. We need to start pushing back before we get on the edge of that cliff. You need to start paying attention. Just do it.
And for the advanced listeners in the audience here, all of this information is very, very valuable because there's winners and losers in every opportunity. And right now, opportunity is existing because it's very clear which way we're going.
Right.
And everything is going up. So you can jump on the bandwagon. You can make some money. Don't think you're going to get stupid rich because there's more things you got to do. But do your homework. Get in there and make it happen. Opportunity exists now.
Exactly. And in the meantime, go to the FCC, look it up, Google it, and then remember, keep net neutrality. That's our soapbox for today. Keep net neutrality. All of you listeners, we're so glad you tuned in today, and you can join us the same time, same place next week and hear more of interesting subjects on the Broad Perspective. Thank you for joining us. It's all perspective. Join us and broaden yours. Thanks for listening.
We hope you've enjoyed today's show. To keep programs like this and other programs on the Broad Perspective Network, go to thebroadperspective.com and click the donate button. We truly appreciate your support.